All right. Well, welcome to our webinar today, brought to you by the Signatory. Thanks for taking time out of your Monday. I believe that it will be worthwhile for you. I'm glad you're joining us. Today's webinar is the Ministry of Asking. My name is Kristen Hammett, and I'm excited to dive into today's topic with you. I think often we've made these webinars very practical, a sort of how-to guide for you. We talk about the blocking and the tackling, the X's and O's of ministry development. But once in a while, I hope we can press pause and take a step back and take a look at why we do what we do, and really the responsibility of what we are doing. I think today's webinar will help us do just that, and perhaps give you a fresh look at the work you are doing as development leaders in your organization. I trust it will encourage you as you prepare to enter into your fall fundraising and year-end efforts. What I loved most about the development work I did is seeing God's people connect to the work He was doing in our community. Ministry workers get the privilege to see that work day in and day out, and donors provide the means for it to happen. And you, as development officers, advancement coordinators, executive directors, and presidents, often get to be that connection point. You get to help make that connection happen. You minister to donors and how you approach them, interact with them, and communicate. So today we're going to learn more about your ministry work as you work in leadership and development of your organization. I am pleased to introduce to you today our webinar guest, Chris Willard. Chris is a senior generosity strategist with Generous, helping ministries and churches grow their generosity. He brings more than 25 years of ministry leadership, coaching the leaders of some of the most effective churches in America as they have worked to accelerate generosity in their ministries. Before I hand this webinar over to Chris, let me review just a couple of logistical details. If you tune in regularly to these webinars, you know my goal is to make this a conversation. Chris and I will be talking throughout the next hour, and we want to hear from you. So if you have a question, please take a look at your screen. You'll find the Q&A tab in the bottom toolbar. Type in your question as you have it. As much as we are able, we will address those questions as we go. We also plan to address questions at the end. So if you want to wait to the end and ask us then, please do so. But know that if we don't get to your questions, we are capturing them, and I will get an answer back out to you. All right, I think we are ready to get started. Do also note one last announcement. There is a poll that I will keep open for the next couple of minutes. And then as Chris really gets rolling, I will close that poll. But still would love to hear a little bit more from you about really the culture of your organization as well as the obstacles you face. So with that, welcome, Chris. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you on the webinar. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
I'll go ahead and dive in. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll dive into our presentation. I have been involved in the ministry of asking since the early 1980s, if you can believe that. I actually became a believer in Jesus Christ through the ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru, at the University of Massachusetts. So believe it or not, I met Jesus at the University of Massachusetts, which is hard to do, actually. That actually isn't true. It was easy. It was kind of easy to find him there. He stood out like a sore thumb, put it that way. But it was a privilege for me to, after I graduated from college, to join the staff of Cru, and my wife Susan and I spent nearly 20 years. And that was where we first were exposed to and really learned deeply this concept called the ministry of asking. Because as a young Campus Crusade staff member, we were invited to put together a team of people who would pray for and financially support our ministry. So from the very beginning, we did not believe that asking was merely a means to an end, but rather asking was our first ministry. Our first ministry was to identify those who would support the other work that God would call us to do. And so I've really been a believer in this concept of asking as ministry for now almost 35 years. We, from that role with Campus Crusade, I did an awful lot of major donor development, supporting projects all over the world. When I left that position, I became the executive pastor of a large church in Orlando, multi-site church, multi-million-dollar budget, and that became another place where I had the privilege of exercising this ministry of asking. And then since about 2007, I've been coaching churches directly and ministries directly in the area of generosity, stewardship, giving, and helping those leaders understand the ministry of asking too. So it's really fun for me to get to be here with you today. I have a few slides that I'd like to share, and I think the conversation will be helpful for you. The first big idea that I want to address is this, and that is that this whole question of the ministry of asking, the whole question of fund development in the kingdom, is more about spiritual formation than it is about fundraising. And I don't want that to sound cliche, because I recognize, of course, that it does take financial resources to accomplish the ministry that God has called us to. But I have to be honest with you, friends. If I believed that my job every day was to get out of bed and to help churches and ministries simply raise money, I really think it would be hard to get out of bed. I actually believe that the work that I'm doing is not just fundraising. It's actually about discipleship. Stewardship is about discipleship. Generosity and stewardship and giving are about spiritual formation. Asking isn't just preparation for ministry. It is ministry in the same way that prayer isn't merely preparation for ministry. It's also ministry as well. And so I think those of you that are participating on this webinar and you're doing the work of the kingdom, but when you're asking people to support your organization financially, know that you're not just preparing for ministry. You're in fact doing ministry at that very moment. You're doing something that could be incredibly impactful in the life of that person who you are inviting to participate. And when you're having that conversation, it's really important for us to keep in mind that when we talk to a giver about giving, it's not because of what we want from them. It's because of what we want for them. It isn't just how much can we put you down for, but rather it's about helping them to recognize that giving is part of what it means to be a growing Christian, and that what we get to give from a heart of gratitude, a heart full of faith, a heart that is putting God first in everything, what we get to give from is so much more important than what we're giving to the ministry, the strategy, the idea, the project. So know that when you're having those conversations with those people that support the work of your ministry, you're doing something for them. This was really drilled into Susan and me in our early years on staff with Cru. We really believed that when we were meeting with someone to invite them to give to the work that God has called us to do, that we were giving them the opportunity to participate in the spiritual transformation of students that they would never meet. They would never have an opportunity to share their faith with these students or disciple them or send them on missions projects or send them into vocational ministry. They might never meet those students, but they were a part of the ministry because they were making the ministry happen through their giving. So know when you go into these conversations with those folks who are supporting your work that it isn't just about how solid your case statement is and how clear and compelling your collateral materials or your video might be. It's really about your attitude. The most powerful tool that you bring into a conversation with a prospective giver is the attitude that you bring with you, one that says, I am here because I am doing the work of the Lord. I'm here because of what I want for this person, not because of what I want from them. It's about spiritual formation, not about fundraising. When we move through the process, yes.
Can we go back to that slide just for a second? I really am struck. It's funny how I reviewed these and then it's almost like the Lord kind of speaks to me as you're talking. I really feel like this final bullet point, check your attitude, not just your case statement. That really is the development officer's spiritual formation, day in, day out. because it can be very easy in any kind of campaign, or as we're approaching this year-end crunch for folks to, in theory, look at, even maybe after today's webinar, think, yeah, that was good. That was a good shot in the arm, a good reminder. But it's really before everything that you do, checking your attitude, right? Ensuring that you are staying close to the Lord as well and trusting Him for the results, and not just trusting in the work of your hand.
Yeah, I think that's really true, Kristen. And I tell you, and I've had the privilege, by the grace of God, of being in conversation with givers who've given, 7-figure gifts, and it's been wonderful. But I will tell you, the most exciting conversations I've had with givers have been when the gift that they gave, or the story that they told, or the expression of confidence in the ministry that they communicated, when I couldn't trace that back to, I did a good job. Yeah, you know what? The reason they gave that 7-figure gift is because I did such a great job with the case statement. I did such a great job with the relationship. I did such a great job with cultivating. That's why they gave it. That's not nearly as exciting as being able to just say, with your sort of hands toward heaven, saying, Lord, you did this. Look what you did. I'm following you. I'm serving you. I'm walking with you. I'm doing the ministry of asking. And look what you did. It's so much more about our attitude of being humble and walking with the Lord and believing this is ministry than it is about being a professional fund developer, which I think is a good thing to be. And to be good at the work that God has called us to do is important. But it's so much more important that we have the right posture and position before the Lord.
That's great.
All right, next slide. Thanks for the heads up, Christian. And as I said, I think before we got on, anytime you want to jump in and ask me a question, I'm all ears, or ask me to clarify something. I love that.
Great.
Here are some important questions that I think are a part of the ministry of asking. As before we go into the ministry of asking and asking a giver to consider participating in the work that we're doing, we have to ask ourselves, as the leaders of this enterprise, some really, really important questions. Now, to those of you that have been doing this work a long time, I apologize in advance for how basic this is, but I think it's really, really important for us to revisit this essential concept of these 5 key questions. And hopefully as I walk through it, you'll understand that why I think this is so important. Before you go into presenting to a person the opportunity to give, you have to answer 5 questions. The first one is, what are we doing? It goes without saying, I guess, but what's the what? Meaning, when we accomplish this thing that we're trying to accomplish, what will we have accomplished? It is amazing how many times the what is squishy or unclear in a fund development conversation, or in a ministry of asking encounter. We have to be crystal clear with people about what is the what. What are we hoping to accomplish? What ministry are we hoping to fund? What building are we going to build? What project are we going to launch or accelerate? And we have to make it crystal clear for people so that they understand simply, what is this initiative about? Oh, it's about this. And they can simply answer the question. Of course, the next one is, why are we doing it? What's the motivation behind this? Is there a biblical motivation, for example? Is there a ministry imperative? Is there an organizational imperative? Something that we're doing this, and here's the answer why. It speaks to our mission. It speaks to our vision. It speaks to our values. It speaks to our future. Whatever it might be, we've got to make it clear why we're doing it. Now, I'll tell you that most visionary leaders, and in ministries, we tend to have a lot of visionary leaders. Most visionary leaders are better at the why than they are at the what. In many institutional environments, we have people who are often better at the what than they are at the why. But we have to be able to communicate both. Not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it. Third, we have to answer the question, why are we doing it now? This speaks to urgency. This speaks to a sense of There is a problem that must be solved. There is an opportunity that must be seized. We can't push this off for the next team or the next group or the next year. We have to do it now. And if we don't do it now, here's what we miss. If we don't do it now, here's the problems that we'll face. If we don't do it now, here are the opportunities that will kind of pass us by. It's really, really important for us to make the now critical. And this isn't just good salesmanship, although you know that when somebody's trying to sell you something, they'll often tell you there's a limited time. There's a sense of urgency. This offer is only available for a short amount of time. It is, in fact, the case that sometimes you have to shake people with a sense of urgency, and answering the question, why are we doing it now, tends to do this. Fourth is, how much does it cost? Now, my experience with church people, and this is probably true of a lot of the givers that you also engage in your organizations, is that people are not always really, really good at math. Some of your most generous givers, some of those that God has blessed with wealth, perhaps, they're probably pretty good at it. But your typical believer in Jesus is not real good at kind of figuring out how much ministry costs. So I'm not suggesting that you have to give them an exhaustive kind of overall view of how you plan to spend the money. But you do need to let people know in a general way that is understandable to them, how do you plan to spend the money? When I work with pastors, I'll often tell them, I need a 3 or a 4-part sermonette, if you will, on how you plan to spend this money. Okay, we're doing a $25 million campaign. Great. Tell me the 4 things we're going to spend it on. What are the 3 things we're going to spend it on, and how much will we spend on each one? That way, a typical person who is considering participating in the initiative can quickly get to, oh, I get it. I know what they're doing and why they're doing it, why it's so important. And I get basically about how much they're planning to spend. Makes sense to me. That's the idea. And of course, finally, the last question is, what do you want me to do about it? And this is really important that we nail, because it's almost like getting to the 5-yard line and taking a knee. If you go all the way through the process of answering what we're doing and why we're doing it, why there's a sense of urgency, how much it costs, but you never ask the giver to give, you've not done the ministry of asking. You've sort of come up just a little bit short, if you will. So you have to let me know specifically, what do you want me to do about it? And by me, I mean me specifically. Not just what should people do, but what do you want me to do? Because not everybody can do the same thing. So what are you asking of me in particular? That doesn't necessarily have to be a dollar amount, although sometimes it actually is, right? Sometimes, and you know this, you're in this line of work, sometimes you'll have a lead gift that you're looking for, and you'll simply say to a person, listen, I don't know if you could do this, but I wonder, would you be willing to pray about giving that lead gift? You've made it crystal clear to that giver, what is it that you hope that they will do about it? Those are the 5 key questions that I think everybody needs to answer before they sort of engage in the ministry of asking. One more, Kristen, I'm going to move on unless you have a question.
So I was just going to kind of reiterate, Chris, what you just said with that last question, what do you want me to do about it? I think sometimes this is maybe where we fumble, maybe not with our key donors that we know well. We might be pretty sure based on past giving history what they're capable of doing and maybe willing to do, and we have all kind of worked through that algorithm in our mind about how to maybe move them up a little bit. But I think that I've been in meetings before where there wasn't that ask, and there's all this buildup, and then the donor walks away a little confused, sometimes feeling like they almost a little insulted, like, well, they didn't actually ask me. I don't know what to do with that. But then also in other cases, if you're not telling me the role you're asking me to play, I don't even know, I don't have a good scope for what I should consider giving. So I don't know if you want to talk anything any more about that, but I know that, like you said, kind of getting to the 5-yard line and taking a knee, I think sometimes we can do a lot of the build-up and then not take it on into the end zone.
Yeah, and I think that last issue, I'm going to address it a little bit later, but I'll hit it first. I'll hit it now as well. That last issue of the giver not knowing what you hope for or expect from them is critical. So, for example, let's say you have a fantastic meeting with a potential giver and you've answered the what and the why and why you're doing it, how much does it cost, and you're squishy or not clear about what you want that particular giver to do about it. Maybe in the back of your mind, you're thinking, man, I think that this person could give $100,000. I think this person could be, a significant contributor at a $100,000 level, let's say. But you don't ask them to give $100,000. And so they walk out of that meeting and perhaps they're having dinner that evening with their spouse, or they're talking with a colleague or a friend and saying, man, I love that organization. I really believe in what they're doing. What a great group of people. I had such a great meeting today with their director of development. I'm really, really looking forward to participating. We're going to give $10,000. Now, $10,000 is great, but let's be honest, it's not great if what you were hoping for was 100. And yet that person might actually think that they are doing exactly what you asked them to do, even though they're not, because you didn't actually ask them to pray about giving $100,000. And so what do you want me to do about it is really important. And by the way, this goes on the other side of the ledger as well for those that perhaps give much more modestly. Sometimes they think, boy, this number sounds so big, and this vision is so huge, and boy, I'm just a regular person over here. What could I possibly do that would make a difference? But if you communicate to that person, $1,000 contribution would make a huge investment in this initiative, and $1,000 would allow us to do this and this and this. Chris, Susan, would you pray about giving $1,000? Wow. Now I realize you're not probably having a lot of one-on-one conversations with people at a really modest giving level. But when you're having conversations with people, be clear about what it is that you want them to do about it specifically. Okay.
Hey, Chris, we've had a couple of questions come in
Sure.
pertaining to these questions. The first one, and you kind of answered this in conversation, but I just want to clarify for folks, is do I ask for the amount, or do I ask them to pray about the amount? Or do I kind of do what you just alluded to? You ask them for the amount and to pray about that specific amount. What's kind of the best practice there?
My suggestion, and what I always have done and what I coach my leaders to do, is to ask people to pray about giving an amount or a range. So if I'm talking to a potential lead giver, and I'll sometimes an initiative that I'm helping to lead, the lead gift could be 7 figures. It could be $1 million or more. I may say something like, listen, only you and the Lord really know what you could give. But it seems to us that in order for us to hit this goal of $10 million for this amazing ministry initiative that we've been talking about, in order for us to hit that goal, it seems to us that we're going to need to see a lead gift of $1 million. So Chris and Susan, only you and the Lord know if you could give that kind of gift. But I wonder, would you be willing to pray about giving that lead gift? And then, of course, you're going to need to follow up with them. But, asking for $1 million on the spot is a little bit bold. And I think mostly what you want to do is ask people to pray about that. Now, sometimes you'll get from somebody, oh my gosh, Chris or Kristen, you've really, I love you and I love this organization, but I think you've sort of misjudged my ability to give. I love what you guys are doing, but I don't think I could come anywhere close to that. Okay, I understand that. Would you pray about giving the most generous gift that you could possibly give? Okay, I get it. But the specific ask has still put in his mind or her mind, boy, this is a big deal. I need to go big. Now, I actually prefer that method as opposed to, we've done some research and we know a little bit about your organization and we'd like you to give $25,000. What if I could give 100? You just asked me for 25. You asked me to pray about giving 25. The Lord may direct me to give 100. But if you ask me to give 25, I'm going to probably give 25. So I just think it's
Mhm.
better to ask people to pray about it. Can I tell you a quick story? Bill Bright years ago asked
Absolutely.
Bill Bright years ago, former president, founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, of course, asked a gentleman years ago, and I've heard this gentleman tell this story in person a couple of times, asked him to give $1 million to Campus Crusade for Christ. And the person's response was, Dr. Bright, you know I love you and I love Campus Crusade, but I couldn't even dream of giving $1 million, where I'm nowhere near able to do that. And Dr. Bright's response was, I understand that. Thanks for sharing that with me. You know what? Let's get down on our knees right now and just pray that the Lord will bless the work that you are doing. And if he does, and you want to give that $1 million, we would be so thankful. And I have heard this gentleman tell this story with tears in his eyes, how psyched he was when he got to write the $1 million check to Campus Crusade for Christ. That's all about being clear about what it is you are asking me to do. And we'll talk about that later. It's the concept is the power of expectation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, one more question before we get off these key questions. Chris, thanks for sharing that story. We've got a question about how the how fits into this. So we talked about what, why, and kind of when, or why are we doing it right now. But then is the how a key component to this piece, to these questions?
Well, when I say how, I mean how much is it going to cost? Meaning,
right?
Meaning if you have a $10 million project and you don't explain to me in a way that makes sense how you plan to spend that $10 million, I am very, very hesitant to want to give. But if you can make it clear in a basic outline, in a broad strokes, I don't need a P&L and a lot of details, but I need to be able to think, okay, they're trying to raise $10 million and they're basically going to spend it in these ways. They're going to spend it on this and this and this and this. I get it. I think that's very important. Now that tends to be really important to people. I'm 54, so I'm a boomer. Some of us in my generation, maybe some business owners and others, we tend to be a little bit more focused on return on investment. We kind of want to know how much are we going to invest, and then talk to me about what we're going to get in return. So those folks really want to see some more details than just it's $10 million. Well, how are we going to spend? Oh, it's going to be great. We're really excited. No, you got to tell me, how are we going to spend it? You don't have to give me a ton of detail, but you do have to answer that question.
Yep. Good. Thank you.
You got it. Okay. Here's another kind of a big principle that sort of is kind of playing in the background when we're doing the ministry of asking. And again, forgive me if this is basic, but it's, I think, really important. And it's this concept of how money tends to be raised or given. And this illustration has really helped a lot of people in your roles kind of think through the kind of ministry that they need to do with different kinds of people in their church. So, for example, it's really a simple illustration, isn't it? If you look at the sort of pyramid on the left, a small number of people, a small number of donors, when they give, the result of their giving is a larger percentage of the dollars needed for the project. That makes sense, right? Those that have the highest capacity to give, there's few of them, but when they give, they move the needle. Remember back in the day when churches had thermometers when they were doing a campaign? Which, by the way, don't do that. I don't recommend it. But the gifts from those people that have capacity tends to move the thermometer more, the needle, if you will. Then you've got people at the bottom of the pyramid. This is sort of the rank and file, everybody, kind of your typical person in the congregation, if you will. Their gifts, there's a lot of them. Their gifts really actually don't move the needle that much. Now, even though there's a lot of them, when they give, when you sum it up, it doesn't really move it that much. And then there's that core group of people in the middle. That's the people that makes every organization go. And their gifts are very, very significant, of course, and kind of proportionate to their numbers. Now, listen, if you were just doing fundraising, if you didn't care about spiritual formation, you weren't trying to grow people, you were just trying to grow budgets, you know what you'd do? You wouldn't even execute a strategy for the congregational level, for the folks at the low end, if you will. You'd say, listen, their gifts aren't going to amount to much anyway, so let's just skip it. But I really would resist that temptation, because your job when you're doing the ministry of asking is not just about growing budgets, it's about growing people. And you never know when that person who is now in the congregation may one day have capacity. And you want to be one of those people that helps set them on the path toward understanding that stewardship is part of discipleship, and that generosity is what it is, a part of what it means to be like Jesus. So we need a strategy for the different kinds of people that support our work, not just in a church, but the different kinds of people that support the organization or the ministry that you represent. Yes, most of the dollars will come from those that have been blessed with wealth, but we need a strategy for everybody. Which sort of goes to this next slide, the idea of a process. And I've sort of been alluding to this, but let me just make this point clear at the top. This is so important to me. I hope I can emphasize it properly. We need to talk to different kinds of givers differently. We have to talk to different kinds of givers differently. The problem with the work that we tend to do, friends, is that we get our story, we get our case statement, we get our collateral materials, and we essentially have the same message for everybody. And that's a real miss, because the kind of conversation that you want to have with someone who could give the leading gift to your organization's initiative or campaign is a dramatically different conversation than the one that you want to have with someone who's never given to your organization and you're asking them to give for the first time. Or somebody who has given nominally, let's say, over the years, but you're really hoping to move them to the next level of participation. And so this perhaps goes without saying, and I know so many of you who are professionals in this world, you do this intuitively, you just know it. But you cannot have the same conversation with everybody. You have to talk to different kinds of givers differently. It's funny how in the church world, this is really a challenge, because pastors, of course, they want to treat everybody equally. And so many of them will stand in front of the congregation and say something like, I want to thank all of you for giving generously here at church. And of course, what's wrong with that statement? Well, one thing that's wrong is everybody that heard that statement isn't giving. In fact, in a typical church, about a third of the people give nothing, sometimes even higher. The other problem with that statement is, he said, I want to thank all of you for giving generously here. The other problem is most of the people who are giving, and I don't mean this sarcastically, but most of the people who are giving are not, in fact, giving generously. Their giving isn't changing the way they live their lives. Their giving isn't causing them to spend their money differently. It's basically they never miss it. So we got to have a conversation with people that is direct and clear and specific to them. Talk to different kinds of givers differently. By the way, you've all seen this, and you know better than I why this is a disaster. But has anybody ever suggested to you, let's say you're trying to raise a certain amount of money for a project? Has anybody ever suggested to you, it seems to me, we have 100 donors. It seems to me that if everybody just gave X, we would be able to hit our goal. You know, that old trope that people say, which is totally crazy, because first of all, how do I say this? Everybody never does anything, right? You can never get everybody to do anything. And then secondly, if you just try to equalize it that way, you've called some people to give perhaps more than they can give, and you've called many people to give way less than they should give. So you need to talk to different kinds of givers differently, and that's a part of the process of the ministry of asking. And then the second sort of bullet here, I just want to highlight quickly if I could. I tend to think of this ministry of asking as a 3-step process. And actually, the fourth step that isn't even sort of listed here is that all of this is done in the context of relationship over time, right? So there's relationship over time. There's communication over time. There's trust being built over time. Now, as that happens, there's 3 things that need to take place as we're doing the ministry of asking. First is we have to provide information. And if you think about the 5 key questions, information is really about the what. What's the what? What are we doing? Then you need to provide inspiration. You need to move me. You need to motivate me. You need to disturb me. You need to identify what I'm already passionate about, and this is really important, and then connect your ministry to that thing. You have to inspire me. This is about the why, kind of, and the why now. How much does it cost is also, I guess, part of the what information. How much does it cost? All that. But then finally, you have to ask. You have to do the ministry of asking. You have to invite me to respond. When you have information and inspiration and no invitation, you, like we said earlier, you've taken people to the 5-yard line and then sort of fumbled the ball. If you provide people with information and then an invitation, they think, that sounds good, but I don't really feel motivated to give to that. I mean, that's interesting, but I don't really care about that. If you have just inspiration and an invitation, then people say, well, I'm kind of excited about what this person is saying, but what are they talking about again? Like, I'm a little bit unclear about what they're going to do with this money. You have to balance all 3 of those things in the process of the ministry of asking. And sometimes this is going to take more than one conversation, more than one engagement, more than one printed piece, to be able to communicate all of that information, inspiration, and invitation. As I said earlier, in the context of a relationship over time. That's a really important part of the process of the ministry of asking. All right. Let me move on here. Let's start some questions. Okay, go.
Yeah. So how best, this is a question from one of our listeners, how best do you appeal to different givers in at one time or in a big meeting is what the question is. So perhaps at an event, a banquet, a fundraising, gathering, how do you appeal to those different levels of givers?
Well, I will say thank you for asking that question, because it is something that all of us deal with, isn't it? I will tell you that if the only thing you're doing is gathering everybody in a large group, you'll have a hard time talking to different kinds of givers differently. I believe that in many cases, the most effective way to use a large group gathering like that is to follow it up with some targeted one-on-one conversations where you can get more specific. And I'll tell you that the people that need those conversations most are the people that have the capacity to give your leading gifts. A good principle is that one-on-one gatherings or one-on-one conversations are really important in the ministry of asking, and that one-on-one conversations are best when they follow a group meeting. Meaning, use the group gathering to provide the big picture answer to what are we doing, why are we doing it, why are we doing it now, how much does it cost. Use the one-on-one conversation to address what do you want me to do about it. Now, if you can't do a one-on-one conversation with everybody who is coming to that large group gathering, then you basically need to show people the kinds of steps that they could take. So maybe use a gift chart or a gift profile guide that shows people the kinds of gifts that we're looking to see given toward this initiative. And you ask people to simply take a look at that gift chart and identify what is a gift that you think you could give, and then what is a gift that you would give if you really believed in the work that we're talking about and you really were going to take a step of faith and trust God. You can do those kinds of things. You can use examples, maybe stories of different kinds of people. So if you're doing a banquet or an event, share a story of someone who is giving at the modest level because they're just starting to give and it's a new thing for them. Then maybe share a story of somebody who has given consistently over years, faithfully at a maybe a different kind of level. And that will illustrate for people that, wow, there's different kinds of ways to respond to this ask. And I'm sort of like this one, not like that one. And so that gives me some information or motivation to respond. I hope that's helpful. It's tricky. But by the way, this is the problem with group gathering people just in groups. It's been said that life change happens in circles, not rows, right? We put people in rows in big groups, and you can learn in rows, but you get transformed in circles. So small groups or one-on-one conversations are much more effective in actually helping to move me toward making a decision to give. All right.
Sorry, Chris, I'm busy writing. That's why I'm not asking a question right now.
That's okay.
That was really good. I love that life change happens in circles, because that not only is true personally, but certainly in this development context, when we're getting to rub elbows, so to speak, with our donors and get to know them. Certainly that's where we're inviting them to come closer to the ministry, but we're also, from a ministry perspective, getting to learn more about them, where we can help disciple them a bit more.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, Kristen, to this next concept or next slide, that we need to focus on the giver and not the gift. And that sounds cliche and whatever, but again, if you're trying to do spiritual formation and not just fund development, you care more about me than about what I can give. And trust me, I'm not only in this work of helping do the ministry of asking, I am on the receiving end of the ministry of asking a lot. And I can always tell when basically somebody is going through the motions and they're just trying to get me to stroke a check. And they don't really care about what I care about. And they don't really care about helping me to really connect with what they're doing. So we need to focus on the giver, not the gift. One of my mentors was Bob Buford, who was the founder of Leadership Network. He wrote the book Halftime. He just recently, just a few months ago, went to be with the Lord. And Bob was a very, very generous giver himself, and a very wealthy person. And Bob believed that it was critically important that we apply the Home Depot approach, if you will, to our conversations with givers, especially those that God has blessed with wealth. In the typical ministry context, whether it's a church or a faith-based organization, usually what the leader says is, I have a vision, I have a plan, I have a dream, I have an idea, I want you to help fund it. But the wise leader is actually flipping that on its head and is leaning in with that potential giver and finding out what they care about, finding out what they're passionate about, finding out what God has called them to do, what they're believing God for, and then saying, you know what, you can do that, and I want to help you do it. As opposed to, I can do it, you can help, which is what most ministry leaders say. We need to say to the giver, you can do it. You can fulfill the purpose for which God has blessed you with these resources. You can fulfill the dreams that God has given you for ministry or for life change or whatever it might be. And we, as an organization, because of the work that we do, because of the way that we're committed to accomplishing these things, we actually can help you accomplish what it is that God has called you to accomplish. That conversation turns this whole thing on its head. Instead of saying to that, go ahead.
Chris, we've talked before, this is a hot button for me, because this was a big transformational, conversation or thought process for me when I was doing development work. That sounds really great, but if I'm going to ask my donor what they're really passionate about, what about if it's not my cause? What about if it's not my ministry? Yeah. And I think I'm going to say, you talk about it a little bit in your book, and I particularly the North Point example in mind. But will you share a little bit about that?
Well, I will. I'm happy to. First of all, take time to get to know the givers. so that you're not guessing about what it is that they care about, but rather you know what they care about. Take time to get to know them. And so that you can say, listen, I was thinking about you today because we're about to embark on this new ministry initiative, or we're about to do this really exciting thing. And when I heard about this, I thought of you because this is something that I know you really care about. And I want to let you know about it at the very beginning. So take time to get to know your givers so that you can have those kind of conversations. Now, also believe that in his abundance, God has all of the resources required to provide for your ministry. And if somebody is passionately and faithfully and in an exciting way going to give the gift to someone else or something else, first of all, if you've been engaging with them and cultivating them and coaching them and discipling them, you should be thankful that they've said yes to God and decided to give somewhere in the kingdom. And frankly, even if it's not in the kingdom, and I know this is harder, it really makes you crazy when somebody writes a big check to their state university where they graduated from 40 years ago. But, people give to what they care about. And I think we have to be big enough to recognize that God owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills. He can provide for my ministry. It's not about how much I can get from this person. It's about what I can do for them. And I'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about the whole idea of saying thank you. But man, you gotta be willing to thank somebody even when they give a gift to another organization. Meaning, I'm so proud of you. I heard about this gift that you gave, or maybe they just told you, hey, I'd love to help you, but I just gave $1 million to Compassion. You did what? What in the world is the Lord doing in your life that would cause you to give $1 million to Compassion? And can I just tell you, as your friend, I'm incredibly proud of you and inspired by that. Man, tell me more. That is the kind of conversation that causes that person to want to take your phone call the next time you call, as opposed to that look on your face that you get like, oh, bummer. So I guess, that means you're not going to give to us, right? And they realize this is really just transactional. This person doesn't care about me. They just care about what they can get from me. And people will pick up on that. You can do it. We can help. That needs to be our goal. And I've actually directly told people, you know what? You're passionate about that vision, that ministry. We don't do that. But I'll tell you what, give me a couple of days and let me get back to you. I'm going to figure out who the absolute best organization on the planet is at that, and I'll try to connect you with that person so you can get some more information about it. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I have done that countless times, and I've never regretted it because I realize that this is God's money, and what people want to do with it is between them and God. I just want to help facilitate people growing in this gift of giving. Okay, a couple of quick ideas to include on this idea of focusing on the giver, not the gift. Wherever possible, create community among givers, especially, again, those who give at the highest levels. It's really, really encouraging for someone who is a leading giver or someone who has the capacity to give to be engaged with, connected to, rubbing up against, being inspired by, being challenged by, if you will, other people who are like them. The development officer, the executive director, you can build a friendship, you can build a relationship, you can be in community with those folks. But it is really powerful when someone's peer just tells the story of how their giving is transforming their family. They're giving, the ministries that they give to and the things that they're involved in are the most satisfying things in their life. That is inspiring. And that only happens in community. Life change happens in circles, community, not rows. And then remember that people give to expectation, not just vision or need. Have you ever heard it said, by the way, that people don't give to need, they give to vision? Have you heard that? People don't give to need, they give to vision. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, by the way, related to this topic. People love to give to need. Wait until there's another hurricane or tornado or flood. People give to need like crazy. It's great to tell stories of need. It's also really, really good to cast a vision, a compelling view of the future. but people also give to expectation. That's what I was saying earlier about, if you want me to give $100,000, ask me to pray about that. Don't just assume I'll get it. It's like when someone at work is retiring, let's say, and someone says, hey, we're taking up a collection for Bob, who's retiring. I hate to say this, but the very first question I'm asking is, oh yeah, how much are people putting in? Because if it's $100, I don't want to put in 10. But if it's, 10, to be honest, I don't really want to put in 100, right? I need you to tell me a basic ballpark of what we're talking about. And that's people give to expectation, not just vision or need. So let people know what it is you're hoping they'll do. That's what expectation is all about. I have one more slide after this one. Any questions on this before I move on? Okay.
I think we're good. I think everybody's busy taking notes. Great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're trying to write down all the things that I've stolen from other people over the years. So
that's right. Search and reapply, right? Isn't that what they call that?
That's it. Okay, here we go. Last big idea here is follow-up. The ministry of asking is not concluded when the person has given the gift. In fact, the ministry of asking with a giver is an ongoing ministry. It's information, inspiration, invitation, follow-up, then information, inspiration, invitation, follow-up. There's a process there that you're gonna really stick with. And so one of those, of course, is that you need to share results. You've asked someone to give to a particular initiative, whether it's a ministry initiative or a project. Well, keep me posted. How's it going? What's the latest? What is it actually accomplishing what we hoped it would accomplish? Is this ministry initiative that we're funding doing what we said it was going to do? If so, show me some stories or share with me some numbers. Stats and stories are really helpful. They sort of speak to two different kinds of people, and some of us like both. Like I like both. I like both stats and stories. Sometimes a really, really good story motivates me, and sometimes a number, a stat will blow me away. So share results. And before I move on to this thank you idea, let me just say to you, it's also really, really important to share results, even if the results are not that good. And I know that's never happened in any of the work that you all have done here. You're all so good at your jobs. But maybe you know somebody who's raised funds for a ministry initiative that actually didn't go very well. Or, a project that really didn't live up to what we hoped it would do. And the tendency is to sort of spin it and just kind of put a positive face on it and then move on. And I want to encourage you, don't do that. Especially with the people who God has blessed with wealth and who give at the higher end. If you have to share results that are negative, do it. But when you do it, share what you learned in the process, why you think that negative result happened, what you would do differently next time. I remember years ago in our church, we raised, which was for us a ton of money for an outreach. And one of the givers in our church actually gave $50,000 for this outreach. And I won't bore you with all the details, but suffice it to say, the thing was an unmitigated disaster. It was a mess. It did not come nearly close to accomplishing what we hoped it would accomplish. So I went back to this giver and I said, okay, here's what happened. And it didn't go well. And here's why I think it didn't go well. And here's what we've learned. And then he's the one who asked me, what would you do different next time? And I said, well, I think we do this and this. We try this. This was a miss, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, you'll never believe this. He said, okay, when are we doing it again? And then he gave another $50,000 so that we could do it again. And he basically said to me, look, in my business, in my world, stuff doesn't work all the time. We do stuff all the time that doesn't work. The key is, what did you learn? And what are you going to do differently next time? So share results, stats, and stories, even if the results are negative. And then finally, say thank you. And I go, this again, this is easy. But I'll tell you, the kingdom of God is one of the only places on the planet where you can give a financial gift and not get a thank you. Churches are famous for not thanking givers. Some ministries are famous for how lax they are in saying thank you. Our moms would be ashamed of us at not getting the basic please and thank you. So make sure that you follow up with a thank you. And then finally, Kristen, this goes to what we were saying earlier. Say thank you no matter where the gift goes. Meaning, man, sometimes even you've done a great job of doing the ministry of asking and somebody just gives a gift elsewhere. You still have to have enough faith and confidence in God to be able to deal with that. And I'll just say one last quick story. One of my friends actually gave a very, very large gift, a $250,000 gift to an evangelistic ministry, a very well-known evangelistic ministry. And when he shared that with his pastor, he was pretty excited about it. He said, I got to tell you about this meeting I had with these guys. And, we decided to make a gift. We actually sold our condo and we gave, $250,000. This guy's pastor said, yeah, those guys from that ministry, they're pretty good fundraisers, aren't they? Now, I don't know if you can sense or maybe put yourself in the position of that giver. But for him, that was like a wound coming from his pastor, who's basically saying without saying, you should have given that money to us. You got taken by a slick fund development officer, which is just a wound. I mean, it's a terrible thing to communicate. And again, to reiterate what I said earlier, what that friend of mine needed to hear from his pastor is, you did what? I am so proud of you. Tell me, what in the world is God doing in your heart that would cause you to be so generous with what God has entrusted to you? Way to go. That's how you respond in following up when a gift goes somewhere else. You got to believe that God's got you. And I know it's hard, but you got to have the right attitude. Let me share a couple of resources, unless there are further questions. Maybe I'll just quickly share these resources and then we can see if there's any remaining questions, okay? Two things you might want to take a look at the risk of being immodest. If you haven't read the book that I wrote with my friend Jim Shepard called Contagious Generosity, it actually is, I think, a pretty good resource to help you understand what are some of the principles. The people in ministry who get it, the people in ministry who understand the ministry of asking, what do they know that the rest of us don't know? And so this is a book that, we've really enjoyed getting to talk about and share with people, and they found it helpful. They found it so helpful that a couple of years ago, we actually created an ebook called Accelerating Generosity, which is essentially an abridged version of Contagious Generosity. And that book is available for free. You can download that from our website, and you see the link there, generis.com/accelerating-generosity. So that's our gift to you, and we're happy to have you download that. If you want the book, you can get that at Amazon, Christian CBD, wherever you buy books. I think that's it from me. Kristen, are any further questions or follow-ups or other thoughts?
I don't think so. I've got one question. It's kind of specific, so I'll send that to you separately.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think we're good on most of the material you covered. I tell you what, I could sit here and listen to you teach on this or speak about this for another hour. I just love this topic. I think it really challenges us to think bigger. I think that when you share the story about the pastor and your friend, and I think it really just reveals the scarcity mentality. As I've got a variety of different ministries chiming in today, and they all represent different passions, different causes, sometimes overlapping causes, but we're not in competition with one another. We serve a Lord, a God who has, like you referred to, the cattle on 1,000 hills. He is not limited in his resources. And so if we can view our work instead of with a scarcity mindset, but with this abundance mindset, I think it will serve us all very well. So thank you, Chris. I appreciate just that refreshing talk that you really shared to give us kind of a big picture. Gave us some tactical stuff, certainly some practical pieces that we can reevaluate, but really gave us some good big picture perspective. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. And if I can serve any of the folks that are listening in or plugging in here, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me through the website, thegeneris, GENERIS.com. You can find me there, and I'm happy to help if I can.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you so much. Before the rest of you hang up for the day, I want to remind you just of a couple of announcements. First, our next webinar will be with Evan Lang. Evan is an attorney here with the Signatry. We are going to be speaking with him on Tuesday, September 25th at 1 p.m. Central Time. He's going to be joining me to discuss the new tax law changes. I know that many of you are wondering how that may impact your giving this year, especially maybe your year-end giving. So we want to give you some insights into that. And then I just want you to take a minute. I know you have taken time out of your Monday, and you have hopefully gained a lot of insight and perspective and really encouragement from this discussion. But I'd ask that you take 5 more minutes as you hang up the call today and really consider, what is my takeaway? What's my key learning? Where have I been challenged? Is it this whole concept of spiritual formation? Is it those 5 key questions? What about if it's sharing results? And I think Chris gave a great challenge, even if the initiative did not work. What about if it didn't go well? Am I trying to spin that, or am I just owning it and sharing that with the donor as well? Whatever your takeaway is, I encourage you to do something about it today. Perhaps it was just encouragement that you're on the right track, and that's great too. But regardless, I know that you are headed into a busy season. I want to encourage each of you. The fall is nearly here, and with it comes fundraising and fundraising events, Giving Tuesday and year-end giving, and I know your list of to-dos is very long. So just know that you are being prayed for and you are doing good work. And always remember that you serve a very generous God who has abundant resources to share with you and to encourage your ministry. I hope to see you or hear from you and certainly have you join us on September 25th at our next webinar. Until then, God bless your work, and don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.